The crucible of the storm and what our ancestors did when the weather turned against them. Let's just jump right in. I want you to imagine something for a second. You haven't eaten in 2 days. You know exactly where the herd is. You tracked it yesterday, found the prints, mapped the exact route in your head, and literally all you have to do is get there. And then it starts raining. And I'm not talking about a gentle, passing drizzle. I mean a heavy, soaking, wind-driven downpour that just doesn't stop. It goes all day, all night, into the next morning, and it is still going. Suddenly, your entire environment has turned into a deadly trap. The mud washes away the tracks. Moving across wet, rocky terrain with bare feet, that means a twisted ankle, and out here, a twisted ankle means certain death. The river is rising, and you, my friend, are entirely trapped.
So let's look at this divide in Section 1, modern comfort versus ancient crisis.
See, for most of human history, rain was absolutely not an inconvenience. It was a full-blown crisis. In fact, what ancient humans did during that crisis might actually be more important than anything they did on a clear day. Just look at the sheer contrast in how we experience weather today compared to back then. Today, when it rains, what do? We close the window, brew some coffee, grab a cozy blanket, and fire up Netflix. You just sink into the couch. The rain is just this calming background noise that makes you sleepy. But for a human being living 50,000 years ago, that exact same sound, the very rain you're falling asleep to, carried literal life or death stakes.
Before it even stopped raining, the storm could kill you in 3 very distinct ways. First up, hypothermia. Second, flash flooding. Humans often lived at the bases of hillsides or near rivers, and archaeologists have actually found thick layers of flood sediment inside occupied caves. That means the water rushed right in while people were trapped living there. And the third threat? Predators. Rain drove massive, highly dangerous animals into the exact same shelters you were trying to use. We're talking about caves in South Africa where human remains are mixed up with large cat remains in the exact same soil layers, and some of those human skulls literally have puncture marks that perfectly match leopard teeth. Everyone, humans, predators, prey, was just squeezed into the same small, dry spaces.
And that brings us to the cold. 25. That is how many times faster a wet human loses body heat compared to a dry one. Without waterproof clothing or modern shelter, being stuck in a long rainstorm where the temperature drops below about 50 degrees Fahrenheit could plunge your core temperature into fatal hypothermia within mere hours. And almost everywhere our ancestors lived, even in Africa at higher elevations, it definitely got that cold at night. Which leads us directly into Section 2, guarding the sacred fire.
In the middle of all this compressed, freezing terror, one single job mattered more than everything else combined: saving your singular source of life. You see, controlling a fire that already exists and creating one from absolutely nothing, those are 2 entirely different skill sets. Before roughly 40,000 years ago, we aren't entirely sure how reliably ancient humans could start a fire from scratch. So if your fire went out, you were in massive trouble. That's exactly why ancient peoples created what were essentially biological lighters. They transported smoldering coals wrapped in green leaves or packed inside these woody mushrooms called tinder fungus that could catch a spark and smolder for hours. When archaeologists found Ötzi the Iceman, the 5,300-year-old frozen guy in the Alps, he was carrying a dedicated fire kit in his pouch with flint, iron pyrite, and tinder fungus. Losing your fire was a fatal mistake.
When the rain hit, this desperate survival checklist instantly kicked in. The very first priority? The fire. Move it deeper into the cave, shield it with hides, find dead lower branches from coniferous trees because the canopy above usually kept them somewhat dry. You literally had to split open soaking wet logs just to get to the dry wood inside. They even sought out birch bark for kindling because it contains a chemical called butylene, which allows it to burn even when it's soaking wet. An individual's entire job during a multi-day storm might be just sitting next to that fire, feeding it and shielding it, because that flame, that was warmth, light, safety, and cooked food, all rolled into one. All right, let's get into Section 3, the ancient manufacturing boom. So once the fire was safe and you were dry, you still couldn't leave. The panic subsided, leaving you with hours and hours of forced downtime. And you know what? That downtime led to an absolute explosion of human ingenuity. Caves and rock shelters from this era are completely packed with this staggering timeline of meticulous manufacturing. People weren't just surviving anymore, they were producing. I mean, think about it. You don't make a delicate, precise bone needle with a tiny drilled eye while you're running from a predator. You make it when you're sitting perfectly still, totally focused, with hours of daylight to spare. Rainy days gave people that exact gift of time. This forced downtime completely revolutionized their living standards. In France, researchers found 52,000-year-old twisted plant fiber string. Over in Germany, there's a 35,000-year-old tool carved from mammoth ivory, specifically designed with spiral grooves just to twist plant fibers into rope. Making rope is slow. It's repetitive, it requires immense patience, it is literally the perfect bad weather task. And they were also improving their homes. At Subudu Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found 77,000-year-old bedding layered with Cape laurel leaves. Now, Cape laurel is a natural insect repellent. That means 77,000 years ago, humans were sitting inside during the rain, doing active pest control to make their homes more comfortable. Just incredible. Which leads us to Section 4, the original social network. Now, the physical tools are really only half the story. Let's shift gears to the incredible cultural and social escalation that was happening deep inside these damp caves. What came next is staggering. In places like the Chauvet Cave in southern France, we find 36,000-year-old paintings of lions, horses, and rhinos, drawn with a level of anatomy and motion that honestly shocks modern artists. These animals are mid-stride, muscles tensed. And here's the kicker. These paintings aren't at the entrance of the cave. No, they are deep underground, hundreds of meters through narrow passages that you literally have to crawl to reach. Someone carried an animal fat lamp into total darkness to paint. You don't do that when the weather is perfect and the hunting is good. You do that when you've been stuck inside for 2 days, you've sharpened every tool you own, and there's absolutely nothing left to do but go deeper into the dark and create a masterpiece. Rain might have literally created culture itself. Think about 15 to 30 people confined in a tight space for days on end. You talk, you listen. Anthropologist Polly Weissner studied the Kalahari Bushmen and found something super fascinating. During the day, conversations were pretty practical, complaints, land rights, who's doing what. But at night, around the firelight, over 80% of the conversation shifted to stories, songs, and ceremonies. The firelight physically changed how people spoke to each other. It softened faces, reduced tension, and effectively became the original social network. And the information flowing around that fire, it wasn't just small talk. It was critical survival data being passed from one brain to another. They talked about where water sources dried up, which plants are safe, where the best flint deposits are, and they wrapped all of this data in stories and myths to make it memorable. This cultural memory was so intensely strong that we have verified Australian Aboriginal oral traditions describing sea level changes that happened roughly 7,000 years ago. Those stories survived for 7 millennia solely because groups spent enormous amounts of downtime sitting together and retelling them over and over again. And finally, we arrive at Section 5, when the storm clears. Rainy days were transmission days. But eventually, the rain always stops. And when our ancestors finally stepped outside, they emerged into a completely transformed world. The storm wasn't just a hazard anymore. It was a reset button that provided massive advantages. The ground was now soft, offering deep, clear, perfect tracks of every single animal that walked past. Rock depressions near campsites were suddenly filled with clean, fresh drinking water. But it gets even better. Rain causes certain plants and mushrooms to literally explode into growth. Tubers become way easier to dig from the wet soil. And my personal favorite detail, termites. In tropical Africa, termites swarm right after a rain. They're one of the most protein-dense foods available, and you don't even need weapons to catch them. You just pick them right up. The rain didn't stop the food supply, it completely and wonderfully changed it. Every tool, every piece of clothing, every story, and every breathtaking painting on a cave wall came from this downtime. The crisis of the storm was the ultimate crucible for human evolution. The reality is, boredom simply didn't exist for them. When you're sitting in a cave with the rain hammering outside and your very survival depends on what you manufacture with your hands in the next few hours, you don't get bored. You get fiercely, relentlessly creative. Our ancestors used their confinement to prepare, to invent, and to connect, ensuring they were stronger when the skies finally cleared. That intense, focused creativity is perhaps the single biggest reason we're all still here today. So I'll leave you with this thought. When the storm rolls in and you're stuck inside, instead of just grabbing the remote, how will you use your next rainy day?